Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I know it's Friday night, but we are going to get it done. Welcome to the end or the last phase of the previous presentation and the beginning of the next presentation, which will be project proposal writing. You will see in the chat box that I have uploaded the statement of work that I promised to give an example of. So I'm sharing it tonight if you are able to download it. If not, please just bear with me and I will be able, you can just give a message in the chat box and then I'll be able to upload it for you. If you share your email or if I already have your email, you can indicate that. But for tonight, we are going to look at the third phase in project management process or the cycle, which is execution. Execution is very important because execution is what we need to understand if we want to understand project proposal writing. So we are quickly going to go through that, and monitoring and evaluation is a different session. And then project closure will be linked to the next session. So welcome once again. And I hope you had a productive day. It's ice cold where I'm sitting. So if I sound like I am not well, it's just that it's very, very cold here. And I hope it's not the same in your country. So we are in the execution phase. And just to give you background, we started with what is project management. We gave you difference between a project, a program, and a program profile. And we also look at the different elements, the P's in project management. And then we started with a cycle. And with the cycle, we started with initiation or initiating. That's the first cycle. And we had about 12 elements within initiating, or 8 elements. We went into planning, how you develop your project plan or how you conduct your planning. And we looked at 12 elements or components that are very, very important in planning. And our next phase is the execution phase. In front of me, I have a slide, and you will be able to see what is important in the execution phase. There's time management, cost management, quality management, change management, risk management, issue management, procurement management, acceptance management, and communications management. Now, these are all the elements that come into play when you are executing your project, where the actual work happens within a project. And each department, these are different departments within a project. So depending on the size and the nature of your project, you can have one person doing more than one of these tasks. For example, you'll find where there is a few staff members, you'll find that the monitoring and evaluation individual on the project is also responsible for quality management. But in some projects, quality management and risk management could be the same person. Then you also find that time management and maybe communications or programs are responsible for this, are falling under the same component. And then you find communications would more be in an administrative position. But I'm just giving you on what an ideal project look like at the end of the day. So what happens in the execution phase? Here, the project team has developed their project deliverables, but the project manager needs to implement various management processes to monitor and control these activities. Here, the project manager takes his rightful position as the leader. So in time management, we're speaking of a process for recording and controlling time spent by project team members on the project. Time is a valuable resource that needs to be managed. So each team member should record the time they worked project activities on a timesheet form. This will help the project manager to control the time devoted to each activity within the project. Why is that important? You will find that most of the bigger donor agencies, they provide timesheets as part of the package that they give you to work with. I remember when I worked on one of the USAID projects, for the Society of Family Health, or it's also known as PSI, Population Services International. You will find that they will give you, in the position that I had as I was the National Programs Director at that time. So what happened was, I was responsible for execution of a number of projects, including the development under those projects. So I would work on one project for US Department of Defense, DOD, and then they would say 10%. And then it is MPOL, that is now the National Police HIV project, and then they would say 15%. And then it would be another project, maybe PMTCT, then they would say 10%. So what happens is, with the funding that comes in, these are different projects within a program. Now you understand, program is the overall, there are different projects, but they are all funded by USAID. And these are all different pockets of funding that USAID pumped into the organization. So at the end of the month, I have to fill out a timesheet and tell the percentages in accordance with the number of hours worked, what has been done in accordance with that. Then you submit it in order for you to receive your salary. It is calculated in the different percentages, drawn from that and go into one HR system. And that is not only myself, that is a donor requirement from them for that kind of program. So everyone in that organization, it's a very tedious process. In the beginning, I didn't like it, but later you just understand it's about accuracy, it's about credibility of the work that you carry out and so on. So what you do with your time in a particular day or in a given day is very important. And when everyone captured the sense around that, we were able to come up with a system whereby people could still work half day until 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. So time management is very important. Cost management is the process by which costs and expenses incurred by the project are formally identified, approved, and paid. Expense forms must be completed. Again, there's forms involved. Quality management is the process by which quality is assured and controlled. It's not just assured, but controlled for the project. And this is accomplished by using quality assurance and quality control techniques. Quality review should be performed frequently and the results recorded on a project quality review form. So one of the areas where we can do well when it comes to quality is execute our work in collaboration with the work of monitoring and evaluation, but then also work with people that are involved with data. And then it's easier for you to go and validate such data. That is where we go and do validation of the data that is being reported to us by going into the field, and even if need be, speak to the individuals that they say has been impacted in this malaria prevention or the malaria treatment program. So it's very, very important. And then change management, the process by which changes to the project scope, deliverables, due dates, or resources must be formally requested, evaluated, and approved prior to implementation. So managing change within a project is a core aspect of the project's manager's responsibility. The project's manager's responsibility. Remember, here the project manager comes in. And this is achieved by understanding the business and system drivers requiring the change and identifying the cost and benefits of adopting the change. Very important in project management as a project manager, or maybe the only coordinator on the project in the absence of a manager. You need to understand what change management is all about. You know, it could be, there are internal and external factors that affect the project, the change management within a project. And we need to understand the project in order for us to understand when change occurs, what to do. So these are just a few examples in the execution phase. Now, again, within execution, a strong project plan is in place by the time you execute. Because remember, last week we did planning for a whole long session. And planning can be long, depending on the nature of the project. So there's a strong plan in place. I say strong plan because a strong plan is a better plan executed than just an ordinary plan. And then also what we mean is you have got all, you've looked at your risk, you've looked at benefits, you've looked at, you've done your checks and balances, everything in execution of this plan. So it's a strong plan that is in place, and it manages stakeholders' expectations. And now when this is in place, you are done with your planning, the project work must begin. So in simple terms, execution is the work. Execution, the word execution means the art of getting things done. So the resources are acquired, the people are trained, and the project moves into the execution phase. Now, when we say the people are trained, it does not mean every single individual training that the project needs has taken place, but the necessary training for individuals to start doing the work. I love training people after or during or before the planning process. That is just to make sure that everyone is on board, on par. It doesn't have to be long trainings, but it depends on the nature. Now, always advise or encourage managers, do not persecute or reprimand a person that you have not spent time training in that particular area where the person is not functioning very well. So at this point of all the project plans are put into motion, and any changes must be reflected back in a revised project plan. So the project manager transitions at this stage the project management transition from a science to an art, because execution is taking place. Although there are still many balancing needs of diverse stakeholders and project team members and executives, it can only be described as an art form, because remember, with arts, things are taking place simultaneously. So dealing with the inevitable project changes at this point in time and negotiating delicate compromises are not optional skills, it is essential skills. What we are saying is you need to be prepared and positioned to deal with the inevitable project changes and negotiating delicate compromises. And it's important, it's an essential skill. So we are talking of execution of the project, and we are at the stage whereby all the planning and everything is done, and we are now doing the actual project. So for those of you that are working on a project, I think you are busy with execution if it is not a new project. Important in execution is the project team. The project team is the biggest consideration since they are carrying out the technical work of the project. Now, if this was an organization, we are going to now talk about HR, human resources within a project. Their needs and wants are difficult to itemize in a structured way. That being said, there is a basic framework for treating employees, which can be referenced by the project manager. So project manager steps in here, human resource manager steps in here, and every supervisor that has people working under them steps in here. Anyone who leads a team, they step in here. To ensure the best possible project outcome, the acquisition, development, and management of the project team is one of the most important parts of a project. Number one, everyone must know their role. Everyone must understand their job description. So the team gets equipped with the right tools, your guides, your guidelines, your aids that you need to complete or execute your job. And it interacts well with the other team members and is motivated. So these are the things that need to be in place. When we do human resource management, you might as well start listening and working on this, because it will be an asset for you to understand this. What do team members need? They need job satisfaction, continual learning possibilities, challenging work assignments. I'm saying challenging work assignments, assignments that help them, that stretch them, that help them to grow to a next level. And when you have challenging work assignments and you find you've executed it, they need to be praised for that. They need to learn how to celebrate their work or celebrate their wins, and then it will give them more courage to execute more. And their contributions should be valued. There should be recognition. There should be job security. And job security is very sensitive when we talk projects. They remember a project has a beginning and it has an end. Managers need to know they have decision-making authority without being undermined. They need to know. Why is that important? When you know you have decision-making authority and you execute it, there's nothing to be threatened about and there's nothing to be undermined about. So that's important. Again, the project team, remember we say this is the most important or core group within a project. And most people value work-life balance, which has no single definition. There's no single definition for such. And I don't want to go into that. That we do a lot in motivation and in coaching. And it could mean flexible work arrangements for one company to allow time for children, but it could also mean a shorter commute in another company. So that is why I'm saying work-life balance. When I worked in the mining industry, for example, we had work-life balance. Our manager, which was the manager of the Chamber of Mines, whenever I traveled for a week and I come back into the country, he would give me off for, let's say I land on a Wednesday, he would give me off until Monday to take care of family issues and whatever, and just rest. And he regarded that as work-life balance. Another example was, we used to come in at 7:30. Our company start working at 8 o'clock, but we started at 7:30 and then we left at 4:30. Why did we do that? 5 o'clock is peak time. The traffic is very thick and it reduces your stress if you go home while the traffic is still fine. And then why do we start at 7:30? So that you can have time to relax, have a cup of coffee, meditate, whatever you do. When it's 8 o'clock and work starts, the whole country starts working vigorously at 8 o'clock, then you are at ease. You'll be able to attend to clients, to emergencies, everything. So that is work-life balance in different contexts. The environment in which people work is very important. Relationships between co-workers, bosses, and subordinates should be monitored to make sure that there are no conflicts. So what I would say is, I won't say I would make sure that there are no conflicts, but I would say there's no prevailing conflict. In other words, whatever conflicts that are there needs to be sorted out at its level in the proper manner, following the procedure of conflict resolution. If someone feels they need to leave the project to be happier, the cost is always higher to train someone new than to keep what is already there. And this, I want to give to you to keep for the time we do project human resource management, and you will understand everything around that. And if you are here and you are a human resource manager, you work in HR, you will understand better. Most people value, okay, we said that. The stakeholders, number 3, in execution, your stakeholders are important, very, very important. There is something that they say in proposal writing, where we look at who's the most important individual, then people would say the donor. There's a statement that says the donor is always right. It's almost like the customer is always right. But when it comes to organizations that deal with child protection, for example, that look at best interests of the child, we say the most important figure in that project proposal cycle or in the donor cycle is the child and not necessarily the donor. So there are many examples of project managers thinking that they did a fantastic job and the project was a success, but sometimes the stakeholders does not feel like that. So maybe one day if you meet with somebody from my country, and I've told you about this beautiful project that I had on the at the Chamber of Mines, and somebody tell no, they would say, no, we didn't like the project, it wasn't good, and so on. So it's very important for us that we consider the opinions of the stakeholder. And remember, differentiate between fact and opinion. These are stakeholders, not the project manager that decides the success or failure of a project. So for this reason, stakeholder management is very, very, very important. And we will talk about that as we go. Project management plan should identify all stakeholders and identify how their expectations will be managed. It is so important. And I always say that if you are a manager or a director, or anyone in a leadership position, you need to know how to deal with overwhelm in that position. Now, this is not necessarily for the designated or the appointed employed project manager. There could be a project whereby you are the PA in an organization or an officer in an organization, but you are told to take the lead. And it's important that you yourself know that when you are given a position like that, then you need to know how to work with overwhelm. Yeah. And then during execution, it is very important that stakeholders are managed according to the plan. You need to know what is the plan, and that is why we said, is that my mic? Does that sound come from my mic? No. Okay. It's very important to understand what is in the plan with regards to the stakeholders. How are they prioritized in the plan, and work accordingly. When there's a plan, it's very easy to follow. And if necessary, project deliverables can be vetted and approved, or the project can hold back from entering the next phase. It's very important. They work with the stakeholders on this. Sometimes you can be a prime recipient of a fund, and you execute to sub-recipient or sub-recipient, which could be then stakeholders. And that is where the statement is applicable. You look at the deliverables, you look at the pace, you look at the feedback, the reporting, the monitoring and evaluation results, and you decide whether you are ready for the next phase. Sometimes it's necessary to withhold. I had an example in the past when I worked with the International Labour Organization. We worked with child labor, and we identified two big projects, legal projects, like one of you wrote a proposal or gave me your proposal on a legal company. So we had something like that. We call it Legal Assistance Center in Namibia. And then we had another one. So one of these, and we fund them and they execute. So one of them did not execute in accordance to what they were funded for. Number one, they didn't report on time. And we had to go and go into the field and see, because we trained child rights monitors, which were operating at the borders, and we had to go into the town. And when we got there, even the books were not up to date. The accounting was not up to date. And we discovered that they bought a vehicle, and we could see in the records that a vehicle was bought, but when we went to look at the vehicle, it was not a new vehicle, but they spent money on a new vehicle. So there were all these irregularities that we have discovered. And within a period of 4 to 6 weeks, we had to end that project. And it was millions of dollars that was executed to that project. So we had to keep withdraw everything that was there. And the good thing with donor money, you will learn later, is they execute in chunks. Maybe they can transfer money annually or every quarter, depending on the nature, or every 6 months. So we had to hold back whatever we needed to do, and we immediately looked for a different NGO that can execute. And unfortunately, the first NGO that we had already executing, we just added the budget to them. But they had to do double the work. They had to take over all the field workers and everything in order for them to deliver on time. So important. Appropriate action must be taken to get dissatisfied stakeholders back on our side. Remember, never had an attitude of take it or leave it when it comes to your stakeholders, because execution of projects are for the benefit of stakeholders, whether they are partners, key partners, or, it's just so important. Always have an approach of getting them back on your side first before anything else. And I'm not talking bribery, I'm talking of corrective action. Now, if the management of a stakeholder must change during the project management plan should be updated. And that is what we had to do with the example that I gave you as well. And sometimes stakeholders can be upgraded when you see how well they deliver. So that can also be the case. So execution, communication is the next important thing. You must have a communication plan. I always say a strategy instead of just a plan, developed during the planning phase. So yesterday we spoke last week, we spoke of all the different plans you should have. And there should also be a communication plan. And in some organizations, it will be an advocacy plan. And in some organizations, it will be both. And in some organizations, it will be a combination of the two. Should be developed during the planning phase as part of the plan, project management plan. So this identifies the communication requirements of the project, progress reporting, donor updates, and it must be carried out. Always good to have somebody responsible for communication. In some of my projects, it was so detailed that that person had to keep record of all the newspaper clips and everything that is there about our organization, but also about the donor and so on. And you really need people that are tech savvy, that are into technology, that are into communications and have both skills, so that there are people that just have that natural gift of staying up to date and don't mind, even if it's a PA in an organization and you are a director, you can get very useful information from them in such a case. So it's important and necessary, especially when unexpected issues occur. So communication is key. Quality assurance, we spoke of quality assurance in execution. Quality assurance during the execution phase, the project manager must audit the systems in use by the project as it relates to quality. Now, we have quality standards in our organizations, and I believe all the donors has quality standards. You need to conform to those standards. You need to have standard operating procedures in your organization, and you need to have your team allow monitoring and evaluation and quality assurance teams to work together, even though these are two very different positions and very different focus. But it's always important that they work together because there's auditing involved in quality. And auditing is part of controls, monitoring controls as well. And this can range from basic reviews and inspections for small projects to full external audits for large projects. Now, those of you that work in organizations where auditing is taking place and you are close to the angle of working with auditors, it is a very, very stressful, it's a very stressful period of time. In our country, our year is 1st January to 31st December. And every year from end of March to, it could go up and until July, it is just auditing that is taking place in all the different organizations. Now, if you are in a big organization, you will either have more or major auditing. I remember in one of my organizations where I worked, it was the custodian, the government ministry that was responsible for the protection program that we had or that we were working on. So they would come first and they would go to all our sites. They would speak to people. They would do every detailed auditing. Sometimes they ask you to go along. Sometimes you cannot go along. Then the second team that comes is the Office of the Auditor General, also of the government, and they do all their detailed auditing. Then when they are done, and this auditing can be 6 weeks to 3 months. Now, sometimes the 3 months is long for the next auditor, so they come in, well, this one are in week 3 of these 6 weeks, the next auditor start already with their auditing. The third group that would come could be the regional office, which is in Ethiopia, for example, and they would come and they would do auditing, program auditing. And then the financial auditing, your auditing partner. So it's important to, even if possible, have an internal auditor in place, appointed as part of your staff, so that by the time auditing is taking place, then it's easier for them to just work with that person and the rest of the system just provide information. So quality assurance is essential. If you have good quality control, you will have good favor with donors. Now, that these in execution, these are all the areas that are important in execution. I am just quickly going to summarize them for you, or just quickly run over them for you again. We said it's where the actual work is done. So the project team is most important. Okay. And I've given you everything about the project team. what are their needs, and important for us to understand care. It's all about people. So we will talk about this in human resource management. And then we said stakeholders are important. Their opinion matters. And it's important that we listen to them and work with them in peace. And then communication is very important. Communication, and do not undermine anyone in the system when it comes to communication. Every level need to understand their role, what they are doing there. Everyone need to understand the communication plan, because a communication plan is like the entire staff together. And it's important that we understand that they need to, everyone need to know that we are like a web knitted together, and the web is not the web without the other person's presence and knowledge. So yeah, so quality assurance, lastly, we said good quality assurance will allow you favor with donors. So it's very, very important that we have these in place. Now, this is what is happening in execution. Have this in place, if you have an understanding, you are able to run a project or to work at implementation level. In summary, we have looked at the processes. We started with initiating, and then we did planning, and today we did executing. Monitoring and evaluation is a session on its own, and we will do project closure with that as well. So, sorry, somebody is bothering me here on the phone. Oh, that's the end then for now. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I will take a few questions, 2 questions, and then we will continue with the next presentation. Are there any questions?